Hello there, welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we kicked off our Update 4 playthrough and got all the way through the starter base phase. We've got solid productions of all of our basic materials, as well as a pretty robust construction parts factory to speed along our future investments. So today, we'll make a few of those investments. Before we do though, I just wanted to say, there was a really awesome reception to episode 1, so thank you all for the kind words, feedback, and support. Just to give you a sense of scale, over the last 3 days, our subscriber count grew by more than 50%, and our Discord now has more than 5 times as many members as we did before. So thank you again, each and every one of you, for tuning in. And a special thank you and shout out to Feudal Raptor and Straub M for their Buy Me a Coffee donations. That's incredibly kind of you, and I really appreciate it. So to everyone that's new here, welcome aboard and thanks for being a part of what we're building. To quickly answer a question I've gotten a few times, historically I release about 2 episodes a week, depending on episode length and personal life stuff. So if you're looking for something else to binge while waiting for the next one here, our 42 episode Update 3 playthrough is very comparable. Update 4 mostly just added content, so especially in the early game, that playthrough is very much relevant if you haven't seen it yet. But without further ado, let's get into it. So last episode, we completed this entire first section of the tech tree. In order to progress into all the good stuff going on in this second section though, we're going to need to install and run some Research Lab 1s. These are simply an upgrade to the Research Lab Basics that we previously had running. So let's take a quick look and compare the two. So in addition to taking a little bit more to build and a little bit more to staff, maintain, and run from a people power and Unity perspective, Research Lab 1s also require the continuous consumption of an input. Research Lab Basics do not. This input, which we're seeing for the first time, is called lab equipment. Relatively straightforward. So, in order to run this, we'll need to provide 6 lab equipment per minute. How do you make lab equipment? Well, in an assembly 2, you mix together mechanical parts and electronics. Now, if that set of ingredients, mechanical parts and electronics, sounds familiar, that's because it's what we need in order to produce both maintenance and vehicle parts. Research labs and maintenance are also, not yet, but in the relatively near future, capable of producing recyclables. We'll talk more about that in depth when we unlock it, but suffice to say for now that it is worth collecting and processing recyclables, so the fact that these two processes have the same inputs and share an output means I tend to group them together. Vehicle parts do not produce recyclables, and I tend to split them off eventually, but I do find in the short term it's convenient to group them here based on that shared set of inputs. So with all of that in mind, here's today's first blueprint. So it has the 3 sections we just talked through: research, maintenance, and vehicle parts. The electronics are brought in here by truck, and they flow along here directly and up this second level via the lifts, entering here and into this final machine. The mechanical parts are produced on site from these machines here, supplied via truck with iron along this belt here. The output flows along directly underneath and is supplied out here to our lab equipment building, along with all of our maintenance depots, and again, finally, out to the vehicle parts assembly. So within the research lab section, right, this single assembly 2 is capable of producing the 12 lab equipment a minute that we need to supply both of these research labs. In the future, these sort of lab 2 and 3 and 4 upgrades have a much more complicated production chain. So we're going to save space out in this direction to the left, but it's pretty simple for now to start. The maintenance depots require no further processing. They simply take these directly, and we can extend out this way if and when we need more than 4, although we're very soon going to have an upgrade from the basic to the simply 1 depot, which will double as well. So this should be plenty of capacity for quite some time. The last thing, as I mentioned, is the vehicle parts out here in this assembly. As mentioned, I figure we'll probably build a separate facility for vehicles later on, but for now it's pretty convenient, and what we'll probably end up doing in the longer run is simply repurposing this assembly in location to extend this mechanical parts production module if and when we need to do that. And then one last point on the output side, as we've mentioned, we can get recyclables from both our labs and our maintenance depots. This is the lab output, and you can't see it now, but once we upgrade this to the regular maintenance 1 depot in a couple techs, it will have an output right along in line here as well. So we'll just collect all of this up on a belt and send it out somewhere else to be processed. So that is the tour of the blueprint, which, as you'll see here, is called the Labs, Maintenance, and Vehicle Parts Blueprint. So let's talk about an implicit decision we've made based on this design. We have to supply these two inputs, mechanical parts and electronics. Electronics we'll talk about in a moment since we're bringing it in from elsewhere, but let's talk first about mechanical parts. So big picture, we have two options for supplying our inputs. Make them elsewhere and bring them here, or bring their raw ingredients here and make them on site as part of the facility. So to me, the biggest consideration is the impact on the transport network. Would you rather bring 15 iron plates here, or compress 15 iron plates down into 12 mechanical parts at the iron plate factory and then transport that smaller number of manufactured goods? Essentially, which is bigger, 15 or 12, because it's all the same to a truck. So then wait, don't we have that backwards here? If this is a compressive manufacturing process, don't we want to locate it at the site of the iron plate production? It's less to transport the final good. Yeah, great catch. The thing is, you can also make mechanical parts from steel, and the steel recipe flips that math on its head. Steel to mechanical parts is an expansive process, and significantly so. The output is 2x the volume of the input. These are, by comparison, closer to 1-to-1. So we're going to build with this upgrade in mind. It's way more efficient in the longer run. It's a little bit less efficient right now, but we're going to spend a lot more time in this game producing out of steel collectively than we are out of iron. So we'd rather set up our infrastructure here that way. I think we're probably going to even get to that within this episode. So let's apply that logic to electronics 1 then. Electronics only has one recipe. Rubber plus copper equals electronics. It's slightly compressive, not hugely. 14 total inputs become 12 total outputs. So then, using our framework from the mechanical parts stage, this is something we'd rather bring in than manufacture on site. Now, we actually don't have a proper Electronics 1 setup yet, so we'll need to make one. Where should we make it? Well, let's again think about minimizing transport volume. The vast majority of the input by volume is copper. We'd rather haul around 2 rubber than 12 copper. And in fact, we'd rather transport 0 copper, which would be possible if we make these as an extension of our copper factory. Let's go out there now. So I'll provide a blueprint of what we're about to build for your convenience, but I figured it'd potentially be helpful to make it live here since it's a very simple one and it'll give me a chance to explain my design process as well. So let's get into it here. I generally try to make all of my builds expandable. Even as a veteran player with a feel for things, I find it's better to give yourself future flexibility than to force yourself to perfectly project future demand. And it's a waste to build capacity before you need it, so I like to be able to build as you need it, build as you go. To make that as simple as possible, using the copper factory actually as just an example of that, I try to make all of the inputs and outputs on one side of the build, which becomes the storefront or roadside end of the factory if you prefer, partly because it gives one simple area for trucks to interact with, but mostly because it means that the rest of the area is expandable. So let's think about our electronics production. What are we going to need? Well, with our main building here as a model, we'll need copper, of course. We can actually use this same output storage as our input storage, so to speak, for the electronics stage here. There's really nothing else that we use copper for, certainly in the short term. In the longer run, it's used in advanced electronics, but we aren't going to be using that for quite some time. So it's not like our copper supply is being pulled between two different things. Right now, it's totally fine for us to send it all to electronics. If we were worried about that, we could also put in a priority balancer here and say you can only supply to the electronics side of things if we've filled up on our export storage. But like I said, not something we need to worry about right now. The other input that we're going to need is rubber, right? So This, in relatively small volume, we don't mind bringing in via truck. So we'll have them do that here, again, in line with our other ingredient. I'm actually going to move this over 1 because we'll probably need to run a belt through here. So next, let's sketch out the core buildings of the module. So we'll need 2 inputs connected by belts, 1 for copper, 1 for rubber. Because we'll be building more than one machine here, you'll see you can't just put both sets of belts on the ground, they'll cross over each other. And we generally shouldn't merge up multiple ingredients onto a single belt, with a few rare exceptions, because you have to keep the ratios of the input goods perfect to avoid the machines clogging up. I generally find that to be more trouble than it's worth, again with a few rare exceptions. So what I try to do is to keep each ingredient on its own vertical level. Now, of course, you have to actually enter the machines on the ground level, but when we bring everything over on a shared supply belt, I do try to keep, for example, in this case, we'll keep copper on the ground floor, but then we'll bring rubber over here up on level 1. I'm using E and Q, by the way, to gain and reduce elevation, in case that is helpful. So we'll bring in, as we said, our ingredients stacked up in a sort of laddered up set of belts at different vertical heights. Now that makes, of course, the ground floor delivery of copper very straightforward. We simply connect up. If we then go up a level though to rubber, it gets slightly more complicated, or at least there are more options. How do we lose the altitude that we've come in with in order to actually enter the machine itself? So the natural slope of the belt, of course, is a totally valid option. It takes a few more tiles, or a couple more tiles, than a lift does, though. I personally tend to use lifts pretty reflexively here because I prefer the sort of the compactness of the build. But I wanted to say that the trade-off is that they're actually pretty expensive in terms of construction parts too, compared to a much longer stretch of belt, right? It's actually twice as many construction parts too. No rubber, but still. So that's a trade-off. Just to be clear, it's a trade-off I'm personally willing to make because I'm pretty compulsive about building compact builds, but your mileage and personal preference may vary, and that's totally reasonable. So coming back then to last episode's construction parts factory, you can see all of this actually in practice already. So what we've done here is we have our 3 ingredients, right? For construction parts 1, we have a ground floor delivery of iron, we have a second level or level 1 delivery of the concrete slab input, and then up one final level, the delivery of wood. And as you can see in each of these cases, we have the ground floor delivery, the default level of lift, and then the slightly higher lift delivery of each of these ingredients. Similarly over here, there are only 2 input ingredients, which is, by the way, how it will be when we go back to electronics, and you can see the exact same principles in motion. It makes it very simple, by the way, to swap these over to something else that would need another set of higher lifts, a third ingredient, etc. So I generally use this in my own builds, and what I'll even tend to do before I started making these into blueprints was simply copy paste something like this, go over here and say, all right, well actually instead what we are trying to make is electronics. So we would copy or sort of pull up with the eyedropper tool with V, and then apply the settings across all 4 of these buildings. And then I would come over and cut this and move it to wherever we wanted to go. So then back over here for electronics 1, I will still build it so you can see it actually happen, but that's basically what we're aiming for. So what we're gonna do actually is get down to a single machine so that we can copy paste it. Like I said, I would, if we needed one, simply come over here and place a third ingredient lift up on this level. We do not. So this is actually quite straightforward. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it 4 times. We won't build this right away, or certainly not all of it at least. I don't think need 4 buildings. And of course, we'll place it in this area so that we can expand it as much as we need. But that is the general approach. And then from here, it's frankly just a little bit of belt work. So I'm gonna do that real quick in a little time lapse. And there we are. So let's slot it into the factory itself now. So we should probably also add an output here for electronics 1. And let's not allow trucks to bring anything here. This is output only. And let's set a let me know if this is ever empty alert so that we know to come troubleshoot it. The module itself now, we probably want to put roughly in this area then. We need to leave a little bit of room here, of course, for our rubber lift to get up to the second level. But I think that's good as of basically here? Question mark? Did that work? Not quite. Broke it slightly, but I think it's fixable. There we go. So you see the rubber can come directly up here. I usually leave exactly this like 2 to 3 tile gap here all the way through so that there's room for a lift when we need it. And then on this side, of course, we'll have to come over like so. So, I mean, I think that's basically it. We'll build some of this once we wrap up with spinning up everything else that is going to actually consume it. Let's go back to the research lab blueprint. Okay, now that we have electronics 1 sketched out, let's actually build some stuff, yeah? So I think it's actually faster to build all and then turn off what we don't actually want. So I think we do want all of the labs, and I think we only need one of the maintenance depots though. So we're going to turn off all of these constructions. I think we'll go ahead and build the vehicle parts, but maybe let's just do 2 of the mechanical parts so far. I think that should be sufficient, but you can always add more. It's harder to add less. So let's let that all go, and then out here, we'll of course need to get the electronics 1 spun up as well. And I think we should do probably 3. Probably 3. So it's not just, right, we're not just making electronics for our, the 4 that we need here for our labs, and the 6 that we need here for the maintenance depot, and the up to 4 whenever this is running. We're also supplying it out here, right, for construction parts too. And so I would like, of course, to be able to supply all of that. The increased demand for copper out here also probably means it's high time to build all of that as well. And that's going to take a while. So it's a good thing we have a construction parts factory, and we're going to let our trucks get to work on it. Now, all those new buildings mean that we're probably going to use up a lot of people. We have plenty of workers right now, but that's going to go pretty quick. And it's a little bit artificial because since last time we got sort of hard stopped out here, we've run into all the combat that is going to keep us blocked until we get the guns upgrades. I have taken the liberty of unloading the crew, but we'll need that again eventually, so this is an artificially low number. And we'll be able to clear out a lot of this, but it's not going to make up for all of it. So I think it is time to build another housing. And we'll turn on the beacon, I think, as well, so that we're able to fill said housing. So while we're over here in the settlement area, let's talk about the upgrade to Housing 2, which we have unlocked but not implemented, including just now when I chose to add more capacity. So Housing 2 is a lovely upgrade. It does a couple things for us in addition to creating more capacity for our population. It allows us to make a bit more unity off of there's a combo bonus of if you provide the whole set of services. And this is true, the further up you go, there's more levels of housing and there are more services to provide. You get a combo bonus applied to your Unity, which is kind of neat. And we love Unity. Unity's great. It also, however, increases your consumption when you upgrade. And we don't have to worry about that so much right now, but it will increase the per capita consumption, not just because we have more people, but the per capita consumption of water, electricity, food, etc. We have plenty of space, right? The other thing it does is save us on space, but we have plenty of that, so I'm not super worried about it yet. Really, though, the primary reason that I'm not doing it yet is it takes a lot of construction parts too. And we are gonna have to supply a whole bunch of construction parts too to everything that we just sketched out. So I'm going to suggest that we sort of push that investment a little bit further down the road because it's not something we desperately need right now. We're actually capped on Unity. And in fact, should probably be spending it on saving something here. It's a total waste to run up against the cap. So let's let that go for a bit. And the other thing, one of the reasons actually that we have so much unity, is we provided water last time. And we kind of rushed through this and glossed over it. And I wanted to give it a little bit more due in this episode because we were pressed for time trying to get to the end of the last one. So let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. So in the housing, in the settlement, if you click on the housing, you'll see that our water coverage is giving us a unity. That's because we're bringing water in and we're taking wastewater out. The other neat thing here is that it indirectly boosts unity further by giving us better health. So this will, directly increase our health rating, but it also, I believe, reduces the frequency of diseases. If you have a bunch of sewage lying around, you have a higher chance of, I guess, disease. It makes sense. So right now, though, we have it supplied by truck, which is fine. It's not great. I prefer in relatively short order to set up something a little bit more automated rather than requiring a truck delivery, which is all of 20 water. This is essentially every minute almost. We need a truck to come over full of water, and they are running the water from all the way over here. Same is true in the other direction for dumping the wastewater. So what I think we should probably do is actually, unfortunately, move this. And what we're going to do, I think, it's kind of fun. We're going to build a water pump over here. It's going to run a pipeline down this way to a new water facility we'll put over here. And then the output of that water facility will also run a new pipe out here and dump into the water instead. So that's not what I want to prioritize right now, but I do want to do that this episode because this is hurting our truck network, and our truck network is hurting, as you can see. Part of that's we're asking it to do a lot of construction. We can also use some of that capped up unity to help on the construction front. So I'm going to do that here a little bit as well. The other thing we're going to need to do, in order to build these research labs themselves, we actually do have to have some lab equipment. And in the longer run, the delivery of this lab equipment should be very straightforward. It's on a belt here and here. But I'm going to allow our trucks to export it, if it gets built up here, to go build the actual labs. As a temporary thing, but it'll help us actually get this constructed. Otherwise, we don't have a storage for this to go to for our trucks to take from. We're not there yet, though. We still need our electronics to spin up. Maybe that's a thing that is worth prioritizing. Oh, this looks good. We are already doing pretty well out here. We just need to get our rubber production going. How is rubber production? Not bad. Seems fine. I think that our limiter is construction. And by that, mostly I mean not materials, but our vehicle's ability to come out and actually finish these things. So what I'm going to do is probably just skip ahead for you, and I will go around and help our truck network where I can. All right, a little while and a couple loans later, we have got this up and running, at least enough to make our first research lab, which has triggered it's triggered the advanced research goal, which is great. That should help us afford all the stuff we just spent on credit. And then that has triggered the find an oil rig goal as well, which will help us out for advancing our refinery in a little bit. So we're gonna let that go. And then we are going to research power generation, which is actually our next goal that has also popped up here. So as a reminder, we're currently generating all of our power via these rather inefficient diesel generators, and they are chewing through our diesel supply, which is not very good. The power generation technology is going to allow us to build power turbines, and that will allow us to run coal power, which is going to be very helpful for us. We'll cover it when we get there, but that's the first technology we're going to grab. Bigger picture, the next thing we'll grab after that is a slightly better way to make diesel. We are going to use this as a stopover, but we aren't going to go into the fully new level of refinery that I anticipate by the end of the episode. We want to grab a couple other technologies along the way in order to round that out. So we'll come back to that, but we are going to at least implement this in order to make our short-term production of diesel slightly more efficient. And also as a teaching mechanism, I think, just to talk through the distillation stage 1 and 2 buildings. They're a step up in complexity, a pretty significant step up in efficiency and value as well, but that is the trade-off. So we'll come back and talk about each of these as we actually unlock them. But in case you are familiar, that's where we're headed here in the coming hours, I suppose. And with everything working, I think, pretty well, actually, we are able to clear all of this out, which will save us some space, give us back some parts, and some of the employment. And speaking of which, I actually think it's probably okay for us to go ahead and pause the beacon now after all. So, coming along. Our entire setup out here is good to go. The copper is actually being limited by mining. If this persists, we're kind of skin of our teeth right now. If this persists as an issue, we'll just add another excavator or so, but I think it's going to be okay. We just had to all of a sudden produce a ton of electronics in order to fill all the new storages, right? But out here, we're really just waiting on the last couple bits of lab equipment here, and we should be able to say that we are fully constructed, which is lovely. We've also sort of finished filling in our trash pile out this way. So what we're going to do is start to put a prettier cap on it. And so what that means is we are going to build a mind control tower out here and say no trash can be dumped, only dirt, actually. It requires no vehicles to operate, but this is a mind control tower specifically, explicitly, just to control the dumping rather than the mining within this area. So what we'll say is everywhere that we've already filled in, which is just here, and that's fine, we can dump at this level out to finish everything off, smooth it out, but we can only dump dirt here. And as a complementary mechanism, we're going to say you can't dump in the global designations dirt anymore. I also took rock and slag temporarily off of the dumpable list in order to try to smooth things out here for concrete. I mean, we're still making it, but I would like to see this thing full. Hopefully it gets there that's actually a good first world problem to have. Our mines are too pure. We're not actually running through enough rock. We could explicitly mine some rock. I gotta say that feels a little awkward to have to do. It's normally a byproduct that we're throwing into the ocean. We'll keep an eye on it though, and if we need to set something up, we definitely can. Okay, cool. So we have unlocked power generation. This will allow us to generate electricity in a much more efficient way than the series of diesel generators that we have been spinning up so far as we've needed them, and these things are tearing through our diesel supply. So while you might think we're setting this up because we need more power, which we do, we're actually primarily doing it because I don't like the rate at which we're burning through our starting oil patch. It's already got quite a chunk out of it, and the rate here only accelerates over time as you consume more and more. We'll do something else about that in just a moment, but let's start with a better source of power. So let's talk about turbine power. As in many ways in Captain of Industry, the trade-off for that improved efficiency that we're about to have is a little bit of complexity, but we'll manage. There are 4 new buildings that we need to arrange to set up our first little power plant. The first is the boiler. The boiler takes water and coal, and it turns it into steam and an exhaust byproduct. The high-pressure turbine takes that steam and turns it into mechanical power, primarily, but also a little bit of this lower energy steam byproduct that is essentially waste for us right now. The next step is the power generator, which turns that mechanical power into electrical power, which is then magically distributed to the grid, just as our diesel generators distribute things. The last building is the flywheel, which is essentially a battery that stores up mechanical power in the form of rotational inertia. So that's the supply chain here. All of these buildings, though, if you can see these icons, except for the boiler, actually all need to be oriented together on a single connected turbine along a single central shaft in order to work. Although I will mention that they are still technically connected even if one of these buildings in the middle is only in planning mode. So ratio-wise, we can get 48 steam out of a boiler, which means it can actually supply 2 of these high pressure turbines, right? And each of these spits out 6 mechanical power. Each of these takes 3, which means that we can supply with those 2 high pressure turbines, we can supply 4 power generators. And this would spit out a total of 8 megawatts of power, which is much more than we need in this moment. So we could also, in the future, set up a second boiler, right? There's nothing magical about limiting us to a single boiler, so we can actually extend this much more than that, except for there is eventually a throughput limit on the amount of mechanical power that you can spin through a single shaft, and that is 72 megawatts of specifically mechanical power. The theme of our builds lately has been expandability though. So with that in mind, I'd like to orient them like this. The flywheel, I never really build more than one of, and technically you don't really need it at all unless you're doing some auto balancing, which we'll talk about in a moment. So what I tend to do is connect things with all of the high pressure turbines on one side and plenty of room to expand, and all of the power generators on the other, again, with plenty of room to expand, because we're going to get lots of technologies in the future that allow us to be more efficient in both of these directions. Now, it's totally fine to just keep adding stuff in any orientation, really, and I've certainly done that in builds in the past. And frankly, it's actually kind of neat to sort of see the tree rings of your development if you're like, you know, you have everything like this, and then you have to come over here and add some more in this direction. Like there's kind of an organic nature to that that's aesthetically interesting, I think, as well. This is, you know, mostly my own sense of organization. It's totally functional in any orientation, just to be super clear. The other thing we'll have to do here is take care of this steam byproduct, right, in the meanwhile, which we can just do with a smokestack. And what do we need? There's 24 coming out, so a single one of these can handle both the outputs of these little turbines. So this is our fully functional unit, right? But we don't actually need to build all of this right away, because as I said, this would spit out 4x2 megawatts electrical power. We don't even really need 4, right? We have a ceiling of usage that is much lower than even half of this, really. And the thing about turbine power, though, is that by default, it will generate what you give it the capacity to, whether you actually actively consume it or not. And that is in contrast to our diesel generators. So as much as I don't like that they're burning through our diesel, I do admit that there's a pretty neat thing about them, which is that they only burn on demand. And you can see here subtly that the green and red curves are more or less the exact same thing because we consume and produce the exact same thing. That will not be the case if we simply generate 4, and we'll be, in a sense, wasting all of the input materials, coal and water, if we burn through creating power that we don't actually need. That's where auto balance comes in. But we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's get things built first. I think that auto balance is easier to show than to explain. So we'll need to connect up some pipes here, which I'll do in a moment, but thinking about what we actually need to build, we only need about half of this. So we'll build the capacity for 4 megawatts all the way through, which means we only need 1 of these turbines, of course the flywheel, and we'll be using, well, you can only build a minimum of 1 boiler, of course, but we'll only be running this at about half capacity. He'll also require exhaust processing, and let's just real quick go ahead and connect things up here. Okay, so I've moved it up here because we have to supply the water from the groundwater reservoir. I have added a storage because it's really important that our power not be disrupted. I do not want our trucks taking from this location. I also don't want them having to bring water in. We want it to be supplied by the groundwater pump, but just in case. we have an instruction that if this is ever empty, to fill it up. And we're definitely going to say, let me know if this is ever empty. We do the same thing on the coal storage, which of course has no other option but to be brought in. We'll also say you can't take from here, why not? And yeah, I think that should do it. The throughput, one of these groundwater pumps, 48, is actually exactly matching the boiler. Again, we'll expect this to run at 50% to start, which means this will only run at 50% to start. Well, once it backs up in the water storage. So I think we'll go ahead and let our trucks build all of this, but as we said, only half of the actual power generation components. So let's let them get after it. And a little while later, we have completed the power plant reward, so let's grab that. Okay, so we are over in a different world at a relatively similar stage of the playthrough, and with a pretty similar setup for power. And what we have here, again, is less than 100% required for the activity of this high-pressure turbine in order to produce all of the power that this base needs. And so, in order not to waste, we have checked the auto balance function. Now, this is an attempt to try to match production to demand in the same way that the diesel generator is able to do. It's less efficient on a turbine, though. So what it'll try to do is spin up when we need to produce more power and spin down when we can save and produce less. This requires the flywheel, which is this bar here about the accumulated inertia, right? And what you'll see is if we go into super speed, which is why we're in this world, you'll watch as the stored energy in the flywheel runs down. We kick in here and we start burning and spinning up. And of course, that's producing more than we actually need to consume. And so the excess goes to the flywheel battery. And when that fills up, we stop, we go idle, and we let that spin back down. And then we get too low again, and bam, we kick back in and we spin up. Now, if you watch as this cycle goes by, the efficiency takes a minute to get up to 100%. I mean, we're at 12x speed right now, but the trade-off in the ability to try to do this and to not waste is you'll see that even at 12x speed, it takes a minute to get up to 100% efficiency, right? If you are constantly spinning up and spinning down, it is less efficient than if you were actually producing directly at the level of current demand. So it's the trade-off, but it's well worth doing because we're saving a ton of resources in this situation. So this is why you need a flywheel. This is also why you don't really need a flywheel if you aren't going to have any auto balance on this particular shaft. It's not so expensive, so I tend to build one in most cases just to give ourselves future flexibility if nothing else. But this is what it looks like. This is why I waited till we got into a situation where we could do the top speed. I think it's just much easier to visualize when it's actually occurring at a normal human observation speed. So here we are, up again, all the way up to the top of the battery, and we spin down. But in the entire time that we're letting this drain, we are saving ourselves on the energy. Very good. Let's hop back over to our other world, where I'm sure our power plant has finished constructing. All right, so now with a constant supply of coal, we have officially a fully functional, up and running power plant. Good stuff. So on these power generators each, they have a production priority of 6. And if we come over to our diesel generators, we should see they have a power production priority of 11. And so what that means is anytime that we can supply our power from the other plant, we'll do so first before these kick in. So these still serve a purpose for us in case anything bad happens or we temporarily blip just up over our top amount of power capacity. But one of the things that drives me nuts about diesel generators is that you don't really get a notification when they turn on. And so it's actually very easy for them to be quietly running in the background and you not realizing there's a problem. The fact that they're on is not obvious. So what I'm going to do is say, well, we're not going to delete them yet, just in case. We are going to pause them. I want the bright red flickering alert that we don't have power, and then to come over and to turn them on manually myself if we need them. So This should, hopefully, save us a lot on the diesel consumption. We should see this line hopefully decrease here. If we had been running those all constantly, which we weren't, but if we had, we were burning up to 12 diesel per minute, which was how much of our current capacity? Well, very nearly half, right? So this should really cut down on our diesel. The good news is that we also have another technology to help with that. We have just gotten the advanced diesel technology. So let's talk next about that. Okay, so advanced diesel gives us access to some new buildings as well. And the boiler is again one of them, but the core of it here is actually these Distillation 1 and 2 buildings. The first looks like this, and the second like this. Collectively, they replace the basic distiller building, which, as we recall, is crude oil in and diesel out. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's a little bit more efficient than that. So for the same 60 crude oil in that we put into the basic distiller, instead of getting 27 diesel out at the end of stage 2 here, we get 36 out. That's 33%. That's a third more diesel for the exact same input. Instead of costing coal to power it, it costs steam in both of these buildings, hence the boiler, but it also gives us all these weird other byproducts. So let's talk about those real quick. The first is the easiest one, medium oil. We get 48 out. Well, that's also 48 in, the input to the stage 2 building. And in fact, I tend, and I think most people tend, to simply just directly connect them. The other outputs that we get, though, from stage 1, sour water, we have to simply dump. This is like worse wastewater. So we will, at least in the short term, have to throw it in the ocean, and it's really polluting, something to keep in mind. We're not too far away from a technology that will allow us to process it, avoiding the pollution, but also, maybe even more importantly, giving us good resources instead. But for now, we simply have to throw it in the ocean, which is a bummer. The other thing we get, though, is heavy oil, and the second output from the stage 2 building is light oil. Now, light oil and heavy oil actually have uses, and not too far from now either. We can use them in a gas boiler, which is like the boiler we've been using for coal, and produce steam. Instead from coal, we make it from any of these byproducts. That's helpful. We can turn that into power. We can use that to run these machines in the first place, frankly. Heavy oil specifically is also eventually something you can use as an alternate fuel to power your cargo ships. Not our main ship, sadly. We will only ever be able to fuel this ship with diesel. I do hope that's something that changes in the longer run. But when we start to bring in via cargo ships that we've got out on the world map, any of the world mines that we eventually repair, we can bring those resources in. We must bring those resources in via cargo ships who run on diesel by default, but can run on heavy oil instead. So that's the main purpose I use this for most of the next phase of the game. Until we get the gas boiler technology, though, something we definitely have queued up here in relatively short order, we have to dispose of these things. The sour water certainly, but both of the light and heavy oils still need to be disposed of, because the key challenge of this setup is if you let any of the byproducts back up, the whole process backs up. Now that's technically true over here with the basic distiller as well. If we don't dispose of the wastewater and exhaust, we won't make our diesel, but it's much more complicated with all of these different items in order to balance. So until we find a good use for them, the default answer is to use this last building, the flare, which is to literally light these things on fire and pollute, unfortunately, to destroy them. And that's technically the thing you're supposed to do, or, is the structurally encouraged and correct answer early on. I'm a total pack rat, though, personally, and the idea of wasting particularly light and heavy oil when we could be burning it for power pretty soon, it just makes me deeply anxious. So I'm probably going to waste a ton of construction parts storing it. You don't need to do that though. My neurosis can stay between me and my therapist. What we'll do though here is delete this building, get a boiler in here somewhere connected to the coal, bring in a little bit of water, and then pipe this oil out into this set of buildings and the diesel to the out here to the same fluid storage. We'll then store up the excess light and heavy in the meanwhile, and we'll eventually do a proper full-on blueprint with a large, high throughput, and I think fancier version of what I'm going to call a starter refinery. But in order to do that, we need a few more technologies. The sour water stripper that I mentioned earlier is definitely one of those, and we'll need better pipes probably at some point here, the burner, the gas combustion stuff. There are items we'll need to get before we can get that fully up and running, but I figured it was worth actually building this sort of smaller, I guess, halfway point or halfway step, rather than waiting and running this inefficient thing longer than we need to make the clean jump to the bigger refinery. That's what we did last time in our Update 3 playthrough. It got a little, a little close, and the cost of delay is, as we mentioned, this process is less efficient, right? In order to get the same amount of diesel, we're burning through more of our crude oil. So swapping over to this setup, even if it's just this small, tiny version of it, will make this deposit last longer, which is great, because when it starts to run out, we're going to have to swap over to the world oil rig here, and I do think we have another deposit out this way as well. So we're going to be fine, but we'd rather not waste the resources. So I'm going to do a little bit of surgery here, cut this out, slap in a boiler. Eventually, again, wouldn't it be nice if we ran this on a gas boiler, but we don't have it yet. But yeah, I'm gonna try to do a quick excision and insertion of these buildings, but I'll do this on a time lapse so that you're able to see it in motion. All right, so I think this will work. We'll go ahead and build it all, but I'll just take you through the tour real quick. As mentioned, we cleared out that basic distiller and replaced it just because this is where the coal already was with the boiler. We'll need to bring in some water, of course, in order to get the other ingredient here into the boiler. We don't need to run it very often. This is not a lot of steam, 3, 6, even if it's running at top speed continuously. This will only ever run at 25% in the current setup. And I did actually, just because I was worried the way that I set up these pipes, I was like, I don't know if the trucks will be able to reach this. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. It's pretty close. Why not just make another storage? That's fine, right? And we do want to be able to still send over to the rubber maker as well. None of this is long for this world. We're going to replace it probably early next episode, I would think, with a full-on starter refinery, which is going to be much bigger and more comprehensive than this setup. So yeah, extra diesel storage, never hurt anybody. The other piece to track is the heavy and light oil outputs out here. I've left plenty of room for me to neurotically store all of our excess materials here. And just to quickly trace the outputs, although it'll be a lot easier to glance through this once they're actually built, because they'll take on the color of what's inside their pipes. I'm a visually color organized type of person, or at least that's what resonates with me, so I find that easier. But essentially the top level here, this pipe that's currently highlighted, is where the steam goes. I generally keep the steam at the top for some reason, but it is typically consistent across my different refinery builds. I like keeping it at the sort of the top level here. This level is our sour water. As you can see, it goes all the way out here and merges up right at the very end so it doesn't sort of clog up alternating with the same dump here. We do still need the wastewater dump at all because the rubber maker makes wastewater, but this can now accept both sour water and wastewater. So this should be good enough to handle all the outputs here. The other thing to track is our heavy oil pipe, of course, connected to the heavy oil storage. And similarly, this is the light oil pipe to the light oil storage. Now, I think it's time to just go ahead and build all this. And then we'll go through, there's a couple goals that I'm sure we're going to unlock along the way here. But first things first, let's get her done. All right, a little while later, we are up and running, good to go. So one last time, just to quickly trace it, crude oil now comes in here into distillation stage 1. We add steam, we spit out medium oil gets more steam, turned into diesel. Diesel comes on out here. The byproduct heavy oil in this brown colored pipe comes out here to excess in this storage. Same thing here with light oil in the darker green of the pipes in this area. And then the sour water coming from the stage 1 also comes all the way out here, merges up right at the very end. So there's not a shared pipe segment that's very long with mixed materials, and dumps out here. So this is working pretty well so far. And yeah, we're definitely gonna need to, let me know if this is ever full because I'll just have to make more storage. And I think this is more or less this is functional. So we have to rebuild our diesel stores. We definitely spent a good amount of it down in the middle of the transition. We of course weren't making anything until this whole thing was operational. I think the last thing we need to do, we have checked all of these goals except, just to teach us how to do it, it wants us to burn some of this excess. Again, this is probably the right way to actually do this, but I personally am going to try to get away with storing here as much as I can. So we're gonna quickly connect these up and let it burn just 4, ideally, of each of these. And let's see how it goes. It does look cool. I will acknowledge that. The flaring activity looks pretty sweet. Let's let her rip. Pretty cool. Looks like it started with there. Our heavy oil is good. Let's clear that part of the pipe. And we should get our light oil in just a moment. There we go. So again, you should probably just flare this. It's not the end of the world. It's a good amount of pollution, unfortunately, but I'm going to pack rat it for us. We'll use it for power at some point, I'm sure. Let's take our reward. The next thing it'll want us to do is to start importing from the world mine because it expects that we are nearly out here, or maybe a little ahead of schedule, or this is just a generous deposit. The goals are not a function of your specific map. This is a pretty good starter deposit, period. And we actually have another one over here, I think. Yeah, there it is, which looks to be sizable as well. So we're not in a rush to do that, but we will do it eventually so that we check off the goal and just have that as an option at some point. So again, our next step here, this is sort of a band-aid in the middle, or the sort of a half step towards a proper refinery. But we will get that set up here in probably the beginning part of next episode, because what I'd like to focus on before we go there is steel. So I think maybe it's time we talk steel. Steel. If you could pick one resource that most correlated with your overall economic growth over the course of the entire playthrough, I'd pick steel. You can never have enough of it. Iron's older brother, we'll swap in steel for essentially every use case that we have already for iron. We'll use it for mechanical parts and for construction parts 1. And as you can see, it's necessary for so many different recipes that we will unlock in the future. It's also the key component that you add to make construction parts 3, which are required for all of the advanced buildings. We go through so much steel in the rest of this game. There's some level of trade-off for staying on iron for a couple of these, but the devs have signaled pretty consistently that they're looking to push the game balance in this direction. I wouldn't be shocked if we end up losing iron entirely, so we're gonna lean into it. So what makes steel different than iron? Let's talk about it as a way to work our way through this starter steel factory blueprint. So we are going to place this here, at least now for discussion, but we'll talk about the placement of the factory in a moment. It actually starts the exact same way that our iron factory does. We still use the same scrap and iron ore recipes here. Scrap whenever we have it, delivered manually, but the workhorse is iron ore itself. And instead, though, of spitting out the molten iron into the caster stage directly, like we do over here, we actually pass it first through this oxygen furnace. And the oxygen furnace, as the name suggests, adds oxygen. And so this molten iron, once mixed with oxygen, comes out as molten steel. Note the 2-to-1 compression. So when you're comparing steel to iron, you should be thinking about a steel as representing 2 iron plates worth of iron ore. We have a little bit more exhaust here, so this is a more polluting setup, right? We don't just pollute at the blast furnace stage, we also pollute here. And then we spit out the molten steel into a cooled caster, same as a normal caster, but it takes water, I presume, in order to cool the steel. And that spits out plates, and that'll come out here, same as we do for our iron setup over there. In addition to bringing in the water, there is one other difference in this stage, which is that we have to provide that oxygen, right? And that comes from this air separator building. The air separator creates in equal parts the oxygen that we need, and in fact at a perfect ratio to supply 2 of them. We get 36 out for the 18 each required here. We also get this nitrogen. Nitrogen we have no use for right now, which is fine. We'll simply vent it. In the future, we can use it to synthesize ammonia. We aren't going to talk about ammonia for a minute yet. And the neat thing here is there's actually no input goods in order to create this oxygen, right? That's pretty neat. Sort of. I would actually argue, and I think about the input good as a ton of power, because 400 kilowatts represents what? A fifth of our current power consumption? A tenth of our total capability of production? It's a lot of power for one building. So, as I said, I think about this as this building turns power into oxygen. So in addition to being a polluting process, it's also a power-intensive process. These are 2 important things to keep in mind when you scale this up because, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to scale this up. There is a lot of steel required in this game. And with scaling it up in mind, as usual, we'll be able to extend these modules out this direction as much as we need, limited only by belt bandwidth, and there's room for a second air separator right here. It fits nice and snug in there. Of course, we'll have to connect up the pipes, but that is the thought. We'll be able to create this doubled up right away, more or less. The other thing that this makes use of is the large smokestack, because as mentioned, it's a polluting process. And so 24 plus 24 plus 24 plus 24, we're making 96, which is too much to put into a single smaller smokestack. So this is simply the upgraded version of the smaller smokestack. This required the Ep.2 technology, which we got along the way here. So this is it. This is the setup. Where should we put it? Well, I actually think this is as good a spot as any. Because of the input goods, we're going to locate it in the same general near the iron and coal region of the map, just as we did the iron factory. In the longer run, I'd love to run a pipeline out this way from this same reservoir that we've talked about a few times as being dedicated to the supply of our industrial water needs. But in the meanwhile, we're just going to bring it in manually via truck. It's not crazy high volumes, right? The water right now is just 6 per, so 12 per minute. It's a quarter of one of those groundwater pumps. So not the end of the world to supply for now, but we will probably get to that in relatively short order. So yeah, I think the answer right now is to get her built, and we'll eventually be able to obsolete this factory once this is all up and running and we've done our substitutions. Those substitutions will require us to slot in steel here instead. Oh, and by the way, I did end up building this third assembly too for mechanical parts. I find that it's helpful because we've been a little bit intermittent in our delivery here. That's a truck network thing, not an iron supply thing so much, although it is sometimes a bit of both. The other thing that's probably worth calling out is that at a lot of these mines, I've actually added an excavator or 3 because, yeah, we have increased our requirement. We have a lot more input needs because we've been consuming a lot of, for example, construction parts in order to make all these new investments. So something to keep in mind, we're gonna have to scale that up, and this is only the very beginning. We're working on the copper there too, as you can see, multiple excavators there, and in coal. It's only the very beginning of our exponential increase in the requirement for our, our consumption of these deposits. These deposits are we're gonna blink and they'll be gone eventually. So it's never too early to start thinking about where you want your next one to come from, especially because we're on an island with exactly one source of, not all of these things, but of iron certainly, and of coal certainly. These are 2 separate. Copper, I suppose. By the way, what I'm doing right now, by default, you can only zoom out so far. I get this question a few times. People say they would love to be able to see more, Supreme Commander style. If you press F11, that's what I'm doing to make the UI go away here, you can then zoom out and see the entire archipelago. It's a little foggy. There's a whole bunch of commands over here, actually, but you can, in fact, disable the fog with F is one of them. Nice and bright. So, just a thought, in case that's helpful for anyone, you can do that. You can zoom out. You can even do it, as you saw, while maintaining the resource layer info. So, I think we are gonna just kind of sit back and wait until this all gets built. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but I'll pop back in if anything happens along the way. I don't know that it will, but in case it does, I'll let you know. All right, a little while later, we are up, running, and producing a good amount of steel. So let's put it to use. How are we gonna do that? Well, we wanna slot it in here instead of iron to make our mechanical parts, and we want to slot it in here to make our construction parts 1 instead of iron out of steel. So let's select those recipes. Oh wait, where are they? Well, you see, in both of these situations, to either make mechanical parts or construction parts 1 out of steel, we actually need to be in the assembly 3 building. In order to really use anything steel-wise, we actually have to be upgraded to an assembly 3. Well, that means we need construction parts 3, which, as we referenced earlier in the episode, are just construction parts 2 plus some steel. All right, well, that's quite doable. We actually already have another phase of the construction parts factory that we'd love to slap down, right? We have our phase 2, which will have the ability to slap right over top here. If I could line it up, there it is. And we'll add this whole new module dedicated to making construction parts 3. Bit of a catch-22 though, right? Because in order to do that, we need assembly 3s. And in order to make those, we need construction parts 3s. So what we're gonna start by doing, actually, is this awkward little jumpstart phase, which is we're going to make an assembly 2 right here that is able to make a handful of parts 3, and then we'll use those parts 3 to create that self-sustaining setup. It's a little awkward, but it'll have to do. So we'll connect these, but really this is just going to take a little bit of time to get up off the ground, and we will have ourselves the parts 3 that we need. Again, not how we're going to run this in the longer term, but it'll do for now. So I'll check back in when we have enough of these built up to do something with. See you in a moment. All right, so all we really need to do is get this first row set up with assembly 3s. So we got a little bit built out here Most importantly, what we did was we got enough of a production history to be able to take a big old loan. So between some actual production there and a loan that leveraged us to the hilt, we have this full first row upgraded. Why is that important? Well, because that means they are able to use steel. So what we're going to do is, using the eyedropper tool, we're going to extend that recipe across this entire set here. We're going to turn this instead into a steel drop-off. Same thing, keep it full. We are going to have to... Nope, the line's already cleared because our iron supply wasn't incredible. I will clear this stuff out here real quick, but what this actually allows us to do now is to at least place the upgrade. So, we won't be able to build everything, but because this part's already done, we've been able to slot in the steel. And so, as a result, that's triggered these upgrades. All of this is built in planning mode, and whenever our base gets around to it, we'll be able to get all of that executed. I think we're going to leave this production going just because I wouldn't mind a few more, but we'll have to do the same thing over here. The good news, and that's going to eat up some workers, the good news is because this throughput will double and our demand will not, we'll actually be able to, I think, probably pause. I would say at least this building. We might be able to get away with just upgrading this one. Let's find out. I'll check back in a moment. I'm hoping that we can unpause all of these buildings. We don't actively need to be researching right now, but once we're done producing iron, we can just delete all of this and we'll get back, I think, most of the workers that we're currently missing. I'll check back in shortly. All right, so I think we're ready to swap over to steel in this particular spot, which means we do need to go ahead and remove all of this and turn it into a steel storage. So let's clear this all out. And I think that'll be everything from the line. I already tried to drain all of this. So I think that should allow us to pause this, maybe even this, maybe if we boost it. Let's see, I'll keep an eye on it. But we are ready to make this transition, I think. All right, so we have our first of these machines in the Construction Parts 3 module, which I think means it's okay to come on over here and clear this out. No sense in running Construction Parts 2 over here manually if we're basically able to do the exact same thing over here now with the Parts 2 actually produced here. So we'll let that keep ticking through. I also think, in fact I paused to make sure, but I also think we can clear all of this out, which is great. Even with all of that though, we did end up needing a little bit more on the population front, so I have added yet another housing, and we'll have to let some folks come on in. Beacon is ticking up, but this is good. We are most of the way through this transition here. So one last check-in, I'm sure. See you in a moment. All right, a little while later, we have everything built and upgraded. We are deeply in debt, but don't look behind the curtain. I'll take care of that between episodes, I'm sure. Over here, it turns out that, yeah, just this single assembly 3 is looking like it's enough to provide all the mechanical parts that we need right now. That won't last, but it's good enough for now. When we need to, we'll upgrade this guy, and then eventually this guy as we need. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think we'll call it there for an episode. Got a good amount done here, actually. I think the highlights to me are certainly the power situation being fixed. This is lovely to have, and we're already pushing right up against it. I'm sure we'll upgrade it further in the next episode, although we'll certainly also have to be doing a little bit of work in the refinery area because, to my eternal shame, look how much of these byproducts we are storing. Don't do this, or do, whatever's fun for you, but this is not an efficient thing to do. I think we'll turn this all into power next time though, so we'll probably build an oil power plant down here alongside our new, actually thorough, high throughput, and more future-proof distillation technology. We've researched all of the good stuff that we need there. Got the sour water stripper. All these things will also take the Construction Parts 3 that we've unlocked and are starting to get set up. So a lot of good stuff to happen in this particular square footage next episode. But yeah, steel, power, distillation stages 1 and 2. Pretty good. Not to mention the massive upgrade to the throughput of our construction parts factory. One thing, just to be super clear, and we'll fix this right away next episode, but right now we're actually throughput bottlenecked. These belts can only do 60, and anything here, therefore, that either requires more than 15 in or puts more than 15 out, because these are 4x, takes you up over 60. So we are not able to take anywhere near full advantage of the throughput of all of these buildings yet. In order to do that, we'll need the next upgrade to the belts, which is exactly one technology away whenever we choose to get it. So because we're not really hurting on this so far, we're actually probably, if anything, limited on our steel input, we are not going to prioritize that quite yet. Other things that are more important to do. But to be clear, this is not yet all the way upgraded, even though the machines themselves are. Anywho, pretty good, I think. Pretty fun episode for me, at least. I hope it was for you as well. And if it was, do be sure to come on by again for the next one. As always, the blueprints will be available in our Discord, the link for which will be in the description of the video below. But until the next episode, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.